Hello and welcome, ladies. Today we're going to be talking about how to straighten those vertical lines and horizontals so that your photos can get instantly elevated. Now, it's a very kind of rookie mistake is to leave your verticals slanted or to not pay attention to your horizontals when you're doing a one-point perspective like this photo is right here. So we're going to go over how to very easily take care of that, how you can do that within Lightroom and just make it part of your workflow. So we have this photo here and I've done some edits to it already, although I will say typically when I am doing my kind of usual workflow, I will start by doing the lens correction and straightening my lines. So the editing I usually do after, but that's completely a personal choice. So the first thing you want to do, of course, is enable your profile corrections. And that's because once you enable that, Lightroom will be able to correct for any of the distortion or any of the negative qualities of the lens that you're using, and it's very lens specific. So you want to make sure that that's done first, and then you move down to the transform area here. And what I like to do first is constrain the crop. Now, what this does is it keeps everything in the frame. It keeps the same ratio and size, photo size, but it comes in really handy when you're rotating so that you don't have any blank space left. So just so you can see what that does, if I don't check this box and then I go to rotate the image, you can see that I start to get that white space up here on the top right, basically on all the sides, right? And if I constrain the crop and then I rotate, it's going to make sure that the entire frame is filled. So I'm not getting any of that. So definitely make sure that you check the box for constrain crop. The next thing I like to do is to give the auto setting a try. Lightroom is actually pretty good about being able to automatically detect your verticals and horizontals and fix them for you. It doesn't always work well, but I like to give it a shot. If it does a terrible job, I go back to off and I manually adjust it. If it does an okay job, but it needs a little tweaking, you can always leave it on auto and then make adjustments. And sometimes you get lucky and you do the auto setting and it does a great job and you don't have to touch it. So it just doesn't hurt to give it a shot. So we're going to do that here now. You click on auto. And you see it did a little correcting. It was very slight, not too much. So it's okay. It got us started, but I definitely feel like the photo still feels crooked. And one way you can check that is whenever you hover over these sliders, you're going to see this grid appear over the photo. So make sure to take advantage of having that grid at your disposal because it will guide you to whether or not your verticals and horizontals are where they should be. So we're going to do a little bit of tweaking because I am seeing that my lines are not as straight as I would like. And the main things that I'm using to guide me are I'm looking at things like the window frames on this side and that side, left and right. I'm looking at this beam that goes straight across, and I'm looking at these horizontal wood slats here. There's one here at the top of the TV. I can also use the shelves, things that are more fixed in place. I'm not going to be relying on things like the coffee table because furniture can easily be skewed and that would throw the whole photo off. So you don't want to necessarily guide yourself by furniture pieces. So if I hover over the sliders and I use the grid to compare to those elements that I just pointed out, I can see that it does need just a little bit of adjustment. Now, if I go to adjust it manually, the first thing I do is I make sure that the center axis, so that's this right here, this vertical axis down the middle, is perfectly vertical. And the reason I do that is when you apply changes to your verticals, it will apply everything symmetrically. So Let me show you. If I turn this slider to the right, you can see that the bottoms go out. The bottoms of my verticals open out. And if I go this way, they go the other direction. But notice that the changes are applied symmetrically. So it's applied the same to both sides. And it's applied symmetrically, reflecting on that middle axis. So if that middle axis is crooked, it's going to throw off all of your vertical adjustments that you make for all of your side vertical lines. Hopefully that makes sense. So we're going to first check our center axis, and it does feel a little crooked. So I'm looking at things like the verticals here between the wood slats and the paneling. I'm looking at the horizontal here of the fireplace, and I'm even going to somewhat kind of look at this screen in front of the fireplace, although that one, again, you can't really rely on loose items like that. So I'm going to try rotating just a little bit because it does feel a bit off. So that feels a little bit better. So we're going to say right around there probably feels pretty good as far as this middle axis goes. And now I can start to adjust the verticals on the side. And I don't need to do a whole lot of adjusting, so I'm just going to do a little bit. And I'm using mainly the window frames as my guide. And I feel like that is a better spot than where I was. So once I can hover over my slider. Once I feel like the middle axis and then my other verticals are all in a good place, then if it's a 1-point perspective, which is a straight on shot like this one, then I want to look at my horizontals. And I can see if I look at the beam that goes across the vaulted ceiling, or if I look at that horizontal wood slat that's at the top edge of the TV, I can see that I do need to adjust it. So for that, we're going to go to the horizontal slider here, and you just go back and forth until you get the effect that you need. And you're looking at those horizontal elements to see when do they look like they align. And that looks pretty good right there. Now, one thing I want to point out is that when you have very rustic homes like this cabin, or if you have an older home, a lot of times those walls, I'd say most of the time, those walls are not going to be square. So there are going to be moments where you have to kind of pick your major elements to use as your guide, and just make sure that visually when you look at the photo, it doesn't feel crooked. And sometimes that's what it comes down to. But ideally, you want to have some reference points like the corners of a wall, the frames of a window, door frames, things like that, that you can use as a reference to make your adjustments. But if you're photographing a lot of older homes, I'm sure you've realized there aren't a whole lot of square corners in older buildings. So sometimes you do have to just sort of eyeball it. Now, I'm happy with where this is right now. Let's take a look at the before and after. So this is if I turn off all those adjustments, and this is with the adjustments. Now, it's obviously not a major transformation to the photo, but it's something that's going to instantly elevate your photo a little bit more. It feels a lot more professional and polished, and it's going to make a big, big difference to your clients when they first take a look at the photos you deliver. I hope that this has been really helpful, and if you're not subscribing to the channel yet, please do so. I will see you guys at the next video.